Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the self-knowledge lectures. Okay, I was solving the sound. Um, well, thank you to the self-knowledge course. Today we are going to continue with the phase A of this course that um, is aiming to give you all the information and the tools so you can get to know yourself, so you can get to awaken your consciousness. And today we have this very interesting topic. You are going to see that this topic is very important if you want to achieve inner silence. This is the topic number 18 of this course. If you haven't seen the previous lectures, you can go here in the page and look for the previous lectures of the phase A, and you are going to see all the information that we are delivering for free in this self-knowledge course, and that has the only intention of helping humanity through sharing this knowledge, so they can get to set themselves free from their ego, so everyone can get to have a presence in the superior dimensions of nature by creating himself internally, and so that we can raise our levels of consciousness by raising our level of vibration by practicing the sacrifice for humanity. That is to selflessly sharing the knowledge for the awakening with all humanity. And well, let's start with today's topic. This is a very important one, since we can easily see how hard it is to silence our mind. See, when we want to start living consciously, and when we are trying, for example, to meditate or to practice a conscious astral unfolding, we can see that for us it's very difficult, because our mind is all the time chatting, it's all the time saying things, and it's for us like very hard or impossible to leave our mind quiet. And that is because of these two aspects of our psychology, the constant inner chatter and the psychological song. We are going to see that working on these two aspects will allow us to have control over our mind, to get to silence our mind. But actually, the objectives of these lectures are not only to learn to achieve the inner silence or the mental silence, but also to get to know what the inner chatter is and what is the psychological song. You're going to see that this is what keep us having those, keeping those resentments, like poisoning our own soul with those bad emotions that we keep for a long time. So we are going to see what are these two. We are going to see what are they based on, how they are composed, what are their consequences, and how we can work them. And by doing this, we are going to learn how to solve the resentments that we keep inside ourselves. And I was saying, like they are poisoning our soul. So in this topic, we are going to discuss these topics. Yeah, but the important thing is that you get to reflect on it. So you get to understand that these two psychological aspects drain you a lot of energy and keep your consciousness asleep. So let's start by explaining what is this inner chatter. Actually, the inner chatter is a constant thought that is in our mind all the time. If we decide to self-observe our mind, we will realize that this mental chatter doesn't stop. In our mind, we are constantly talking about what we have to do, or about something that we have already done, or we are chatting in our mind about other people, or we are complaining about something, or we are thinking about something that someone told us, or sometimes we are just like sports commentators, like narrating everything that we are doing. sometimes we are doing something and we are like there, I'm doing this and I'm going to put this and this chat never stops. Other times we are singing songs in our minds, so there is also there noise in our minds. And if we pay attention, we will see that the vibes of chatting in our mind is so big that many times the conversations that we are keeping there doesn't have like any real meaning at all. Yeah. And what happens if we remember the lecture number 4, where we talk about the 7 energetic centers that we possess internally, there we analyze the fact that every day these energetic centers are supplied with energy, with enough energy, so that they can fulfill their different functions in the next day. And as we saw, the most important of our internal centers is the sexual one. And it matches the most important energy that we have, that is the sexual energy. Yeah, and because this is the energy that is going to help us to get to create ourselves internally. And it is precisely the misuse that each of our psychological selves, the parts of our ego, make of our energy, is what makes us to feel constantly exhausted. And it is the reason why we don't have enough energy to get to create ourselves internally. Since as any of these centers is exhausted, it goes and it starts like stealing the energy from the sexual center. And you see that our mental center or our intellectual center, and that unstoppable train of thoughts that we have every day, exhaust the amount of energy of our mental center very quickly. Then what it does is that it comes and go to steal the energy from the sexual center to continue functioning. And what happens that this unbalance of our centers prevent us from being able to create ourselves in the practice of the suprasex, because we live energetically wearing ourselves out the whole day. So when we go to sex, we don't have enough energy to make ascent through our spine to create our existential bodies that you already know, and we were speaking in the previous lecture, is what we do for the spiritual birth factor, which is the practice of the sexual transmutation or suprasex practice. And well, we have probably already heard that the best way to think is not to think. And this is precisely because long ago we lost control over our mind, that it's no longer our consciousness that is using our intellectual capacity when our consciousness needs it. No, nowadays it's the mind that dominates us. Or rather, we can say that it is every one of our psychological defects that have taken over our mind, creating a constant and unnecessary and insubstantial internal chatter. And this has ended up becoming the vice of thinking. So if the anger is manifested in me, it's going to start using my mind to start. So I start like thinking about the resentment that I have, or what that person did, or what I'm going to tell you. And if it is the loss, the same, it's going to use the mind to project in my mind all those pornish images, and to remember when I did that, and how that girls look, or how that guy looks, etc. It's using our mind all the time. Or if it is, envy, using my mind all the time, greed, using our mind all the time, etc. We have the vice of thinking, and we can see that when we want to make our mind to shut up, and we try to do so, we try to be in moments without thinking, we begin to feel anxiety. And we start to feel like an impossibility of keeping our mind still. We are trying to meditate, we're trying to keep inner silence, and we are just so hard there and try to stay there for 30 minutes and 5 minutes passes and we are already like, oh my god, I need to do something. Or the mind starts talking and we start listening to the psychological defects in our mind. There we can corroborate that thinking, that constant mental chatter has become a vice for us, because when we want to stop it, we start feeling like that anxiety. And we can even see how people are walking, for example, on the street, and they are talking to themselves, without being on the hands free, talking to anyone. No, they are actually talking to themselves, and even, yeah, to yourself. It has probably happened that you find yourself talking to yourself, and that is the product of that constant inner chatter that comes to manifest externally. That you start like expressing our own inner chatter, and you start like verbally you start to talk to yourself. And actually, a person who does this, but does this like in a compulsive way, they talk alone in a compulsive way, is considered mentally unbalanced, right? And we see normal the fact that we also do it, but it is not yet so intense. We don't think ourselves as crazy people, but we are. And we must realize that this has nothing to do with being conscious. On the opposite, being conscious is having a total control of ourselves and having a total control of our mind. So if we want to achieve the mental control, if we want really to experience that inner silence, in which the consciousness can express itself directly in us, because that is what happens when we get to silence our mind, we must start by knowing what is the foundation of that constant inner talk, inner chatter. What is it made of? Understand in depth what are the consequences that it brings us, so we can reach like an understanding of the urgent need to work on it, and we start to work on it. Okay, so what is the foundation of the inner chatter? It's important to begin by realizing that in our inner talk, in each of the films that we make in our minds, we are always the main character. We are the heroes, yeah? And we are, in our mind, the one who always does things well, or the one who always has the best intentions, or the one that knows it all, or the one who always has a very justification for what he do. And it doesn't matter how terrible we are doing, we are always like the best ones in our minds. Or on the other side, in our minds, we are always the victims, the good guys, yes, the same, but that everybody pays us badly. And we can see that without a doubt, the foundation of our constant inner chatter, is the self-sympathy, is our pride. If you get to self-observe what your thoughts are constantly made of, you are going to discover that self-sympathy, how you love yourself so much. Because above any affection that we say that we feel for others, the truth is that we only sympathize with ourselves, with our much beloved ego. Because if someone thinks the same that we do, or agree with us, we sympathize with that person, right? But we feel a lot of antipathy and even hatred towards people who don't sympathize with us, who don't agree with us. And that way we can see that we are like the ones that we really like. And if we start to observe our mind and delve into what is happening there, and to get to know who is the one that is constantly speaking in our mind, we will undoubtedly find pride. It reflected in its aspect of superiority or in its aspect of inferiority. But it is always a total self importance because we love ourselves too much. Even though when we feel that we worth nothing, or that we deserve to die, we are actually being or acting by that self-importance. Yeah, we need to actually reflect this to get to understand that we are 100% narcissist. Although we think we are very empathetic and sincere, the reality is that no, we are 100% narcissists. And if we don't get to observe that in ourselves, to recognize that in ourselves, then we cannot change it. Yeah. And the thing is that as long as we continue to be bottled up in self-sympathy, any development of our consciousness, of our inner being, becomes something more than impossible. Because self-sympathy is actually selfishness. It is based on an overvaluation of one's own ego. You know, that self-love or self-esteem that is socially accepted as something necessary is actually a reaffirmation of our ego and an overvaluation of our personality. Because true self-love, the true self-esteem, is in reality a constant desire to free and awaken one's own consciousness. And that inevitably translates into that like fervent desire to help everyone else. Since as we get to wake up, we realize that we all come from the same source, that we are all brothers in the search of the same purpose, that is the self-realization. So we like free ourselves from that bottle of that I am the important thing, that everything else is against me, and the ones that I'm only going to love are the ones that likes me. And if I get to break that, and if I get to understand that this is only a lie in which my ego had me my whole life, that I was all the time like trapped there in that mental condition. And if I get to destroy that, I am going to experience the reality. I'm going to get to experience the inner peace, because I am going to make the way to free and awaken my consciousness, and I'm going to stop seeing others are the bad guys, yeah, but I'm going to start seeing that we are all the same, yeah. So we are going to start developing love, and it is because of this self sympathy that we all the time believe that our opinion is very important, and that we think that we know about everything. And this is why we go around all the time emitting in our mind an opinion about all things. We see a person and immediately we begin to give a mental opinion about how that person looks, or about what is he doing, if it is right or if it's not. And there it is our self-sympathy, always talking about others, or always talking about everything. And yeah, with everything, we can see that we do the same with anything that we find. Even in social media, we see a post that is maybe none of our business, but we think that we always have to express our important opinion because of our self-sympathy. If you get to understand this, if you get to understand that self-sympathy, that is not really a self-love or real self-esteem, or a lie, but a wrong understanding and an overvaluation of my ego and my personality, we are going to understand that the importance of start studying it and get rid of this self-sympathy if we want to achieve inner silence. Because as long as we love ourselves too much and that we have that urge to admit our opinion all the time about everything, we are going to be all the time chatting, all the time saying things. And well, what is the inner chatter made of? This is very interesting because our inner chatter, if you get to observe what your mind is saying all the time, you are going to see that is most of the time made up of half-truths or of wrong related truths. And why half-truths? Because always, to every situation that happens, we tend to add or to take something away. You know, to get to accommodate that situation to our pride and to defend our pride, our self-sympathy. For example, something happened, whatever, but when we comment on that situation in our mind, we are always adding something and taking away things. And when we get to tell to someone else to that situation, there are always things that we make up, you know, things that we add to the truth. So we are like the good ones in the stories that we make, and there are always things that we take away from it. For example, if we have an argument with someone, you know, and someone I don't know, says something different to what I think, or we're like how can I say, okay, he was expressing something bad about us or whatever. The thing is that what happens when we go and we tell when we go and we tell that story to another one, we are not going to tell that story right how it happens. We are not going to say what we said, how we defend ourselves, how we were like also saying bad things about that person. No, we are going to make our point like more the good one, the one with the good intentions, and we are going to try to see the other person like the wrong one, like the bad guy, you know, etc. That is what we constantly do, and that is because of our self-sympathy. And what happens? We do that all the time in our mind. And I mean, we have any situation with anyone, we have any conversation with anyone, and that conversation doesn't, I mean, never ends there. No, we go and that person goes, and both of us are continue with the conversation in our mind, you know. We are talking with anyone, and I go and I am there now commenting, oh my God, what that girl thinks that she is, how she is with it all the time there with the inner chatter. And our self-sympathy always leads us to tell only what is convenient for us to tell. And what is the wrong related truth is when we tend to take two facts or two realities, some things that already happened, and in our mind we just put them together, and they actually don't have like any relation, but we do so we can like reaffirm what we think. For example, let's say that we are walking on the street, and in the opposite direction comes somebody that owe us something or some money, you know, and that person passes without saying hello. Immediately in our mind, what is going to happen? We are going to start like talking about that person, about how shameless is that person, how he passes by without greeting me, and that is because he doesn't want to pay me, and now he's hiding from me. But if we reflect on that inner talk that we suddenly have installed in our mind, and that can last all day there or even longer, we will realize that we are simply wrongly relating truths. For what? For feeding that negative state in relation to that person. Because yes, it is true that the person owes us money. That is, yeah, one truth. And it is true that the person passed by and didn't greet us. That is another truth. But it is not true that he did so because he didn't want to pay us. And why it is not true? Because we don't know that. We are only speculating. Yeah? And maybe that person didn't see us or didn't recognize us because he was so absorbed in his own mental chat, or perhaps it could be that, yeah, he actually tried to avoid us. Yeah. But that part, we don't really know. And we cannot take an speculation for certain because it is a lie. And consciousness is based on fact on facts, on realities. But we want to take our speculation and mix them with facts that we have. So we defend and we try to justify or to sustain our mental talk. If, on the contrary, when that situation happens, we see the situation, and when the mind tries to start talking, speculating, saying things, adding things, we eliminate each one of those defects that are manifesting. The anger, the liar, the whatever. We eliminate that. We are going to be able to keep the mental silence, right? And another example. Someone, let's say that my partner is at work, and he always leave work at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And it is 7 or 8, and I don't know where he is, and he is not answering the cell phone. I have there two truths. He always leaves the work at 5. He is not answering the phone. But now, in my mind, I'm going to start a chatter, a constant talk. I'm going to start speculating things. There are a lot of psychological defects are going to use the situation to feed themselves, because I'm going to, for example, think that he is being unfaithful to me with that coworker, for example. And there, my adulterous self, or my unfaithful self is there manifesting and is feeding on my energy. Or I'm imagining that he had a car accident, and I'm imagining the blood, the dead, everything. And there are a lot of very perverse psychological defects of myself are using the situation to use my mental energy so they can feed. If, on the contrary, I eliminate all of those speculations, and if I have to do something, I do so. And or if I have to just to wait, I'm going to wait, but I'm not gonna let that my mind and makes me to enter into that hell of that inner chatter. I eliminate all that, and I keep my inner silence and my inner peace. And then my partner comes and tells me that he had to make, I don't know, he had to make a couple of, to work 2 more hours, and that he left the cell phone charger at home, whatever. That was the reason. I didn't make the mistake of misusing a lot of my energy on that anguish and in that mental chatter, because I did that. I wrongly related those truths, and I enter myself in that hell. I made myself miserable for those 2 hours, for example. And you need to learn to get to understand what are the consequences of keeping that constant inner chatter that we have. The first thing is that we spend, as I was saying, a lot of mental and emotional energy. Many psychological defects, and some really heavy ones, are fed and strengthen there by that constant chatter. It's important that when we start listening our mind talking, we get to reflect who is there talking, who is the, because when we think that we are thinking, we are actually hearing. And hearing what are the different parts of our ego have to say. And if we get to discover who is the one that is talking, we can ask our Divine Mother to eliminate that defect. And I'm going to set myself free of that defect, and I'm going to rescue the consciousness that was trapped there. And another consequence is that our consciousness falls asleep as we live totally distracted by chatting all the time in our mind. And our consciousness can only awaken and can only manifest when we manage to live in the present moment, in the here and now. And by this, we need to be practicing the self-observation and be practicing the psychological death. We must be there observing what are the psychological defects that are trying to manifest, so we can eliminate them, so we keep rescuing our consciousness that is trapped in the ego. But if we are all the time talking in our minds, we are going to be all the time distracted by our mind, and we are never going to be able to stay here, self-observing, self-discovering, and awakening, right? And another consequence of this is that we keep making mistakes all the time. You see that you are there talking in your mind, and you are not like paying attention in what you're doing. So you are not doing things concentrated. And another consequence is that we get into and we stay all the time in that inner confusion, because we no longer discern what is true of all this and what is not. And our pride grows. And every time that need to criticize everything and everyone is also growing in ourselves. And obviously, internally, we are making many enemies, because although on the outside we smile and we are kind to everyone, inside us, many times, at the same time that we are smiling to them, we are treating them very badly in our minds. So that is another of the consequences of this. And now, the most important thing: how do we work this inner chatter? How we get rid of this? Well, the first step will be to learn not to touch things with our inner tongue. That is very important. If we want to awaken our consciousness, we must begin by making an effort to stop being asleep, fascinated, identified with everything. So we need to learn that if I see something, okay, I see that, and I let it pass. I don't need to identify myself with that. I don't need to start talking about that, because that way, talking in my mind, and well, the same. And because if I get identified with that, my consciousness is going to fall asleep, and my ego is going to start manifesting, right? For example, I am walking and I'm in self-observation. I'm going to be aware of myself all the time, self-remembering, being present. I'm going to let my consciousness to manifest. Okay, passes this girl with this extremely short skirt. Immediately, some defects start. The envy, the lust, the homosexual, the rape, the how is the name of the guys that rape? I forgot. Okay, if you get to self-observe, really, you're going to see all the defects that are trying to manifest there. Everything that you say about that, if you get to observe who is saying that, you're going to see that there are different psychological defects manifesting. So when you are emitting that internal opinion, actually is your ego talking. And the only way to keep the inner silence is to remain internally silent. As I was saying, to not touch things with our internal tongue. Here you have an example. Someone is walking down the street and sees a man who he thinks that looks like his Uncle George. And you can see here that just because of that thing, he starts a whole story. He starts to talk a lot. He starts to remember that it's saying in his mind that it's been a long time that it's been a long time since the last time he saw his Uncle George, and he remembered that the last time was on vacation on the beach, and there he's feeling all those sensations of being on vacation, and there are some psychological defects manifesting. How good it would be to be on the beach. Yeah, all those pleasures, he's feeling them again. And then start the minds with with what money, because this salary is not enough for anything. And now another psychological defect is manifesting, saying that, okay, I think it's time to ask my boss for a raise, and they're blah 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 blah. The whole afternoon, for example, having a lot of emotions, pleasant and unpleasant, talking a lot in his mind, and just because he looked a guy that looked like his Uncle George. Yeah, and if he just when seeing the guy start observing all the ones that are trying to talk in his mind, and he start asking for death to anyone, he's going to keep that inner silence, and his consciousness will be able to manifest, not his ego. So it is necessary that we begin to observe all these effects that are constantly trying to manifest in our mind to get us out of our self-observation state, because only when we get to see who is talking and we eliminate that, we can actually remain in silence. That is like the trick, and that is like the first trick that I'm going to give you today. That is necessary to observe in every situation who is talking internally, and to see that sometimes we keep quiet externally, because not every time we express externally our opinion. However, with our internal tongue, we are most of the time skinning people alive. So we need to start seeing this. And another trick, let's say, to keep inner silence is to discover or to observe what we are and what we take from reality, because once we discover ourselves already having an inner chatter about something, we must stop it immediately, and we start to analyze what am I adding and what am I taking away from the reality. And there we will be able to discover several of our psychological defects that are there manifesting, and we are going to discover there also our self-sympathy, so we can eliminate that. Yeah, and we are going to be asking for death to our Divine Mother for every detail that we get to observe. And well, the third trick to achieve inner silence is to learn to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And that is very important. In any situation in which we are, we see ourselves criticizing, blaming, judging, or treating someone badly internally for whatever reason, we must make the effort to put ourselves in their shoes. And to do so, we must ask ourselves, when have I done the same? To put aside that self-sympathy and really look inside ourselves for those moments in which we did or we thought what we are criticizing in the other person. That way, when we are in those internal talks about someone, because most of the time, because of our self-sympathy, we are talking about everyone. If we get to enter and to ask ourselves, when have I done the same? I'm going to discover that all those psychological defects that I'm actually criticizing in others live inside of me. And if they live inside of me, I must start understanding how they work, how they make me feel, what they make me think, how they make me act. And I am going to rescue an understanding and wisdom that is going to bring light to my inner work, and that are going to give me enough understanding to not criticize anyone. So what we are going to do, that there we are going to be rescuing consciousness, but we are going to be also saving energy, because we are not letting all of those defects to come and steal all of our energy, making us feel exhausted later. No, we are keeping that inner silence, and that is so important, to learn to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, because that will allow us to use everybody and every situation as a mirror in which I can get to know myself. I need to know that everything that I judge and that I criticize in others is inside of me. So if I get to understand that, I'm going to get rid also of that role of victim, because it will be just like no longer valid, you know. And we must remember that golden rule that says, "Done unto others as you would have them do unto you." And to do so, we must put ourselves in the other person's shoes, so we get to really understand them. Yeah. And this is something to reflect on, that what truly counts is the way that we behave internally and invisibly with one another. Because unfortunately, even if we are very cautious and every time sincere to others, there is no doubt that invisibly and internally we treat people very bad. And we need to study that, because most of the time we don't give like importance to what we are thinking and what we are feeling. We think that we are good people because we are acting good, because we are repressing the bad things that we feel or think. And we think that if it is repressed in us, it's okay, nothing happens. Yeah, I'm good. But if we get to understand that what is inside of us is what make us up. I mean, that we are made up of all those things that live inside of us. And we are going to get to understand that we are not those good guys that we think we are. That actually this goodness is just a mask that is hiding and repressing the bad things inside of me. So it is important that we get to observe all of those defects that are manifesting, making us feel all those bad emotions and those bad thoughts, and we start eliminating them. And those are the tricks to achieve the inner silence, to stop with the inner chatter. If you have any question, please leave your questions in the comments, and I'm going to solve any question that you have. Now, the psychological song. What is this? Well, the psychological song, of course, when an inner chatter get worse, because it stands over time and it is supported by pain, by suffering. So this new ingredient that is pain, that is suffering, make us feel the need to repeat that inner chatter incessantly, over and over again. That is why it is so related with our resentments, you know. So that we feel pain about something that happens, or about something that someone made to us, and we don't manage to get rid of that, and we start like feeling that pain, and we are all the time like repeating and repeating and repeating that in our head. That is why it is psychological song. And we are going to tell other people, and we are going to tell them over and over again, and it becomes a psychological song. And we are going to be like all the times looking for the right occasion to go and sing our internal song. And sometimes it gets so repetitive all the time with the same complaint, with the same story, that people cannot tell us, they cannot come and tell, hey, how are you? Because when someone say, how are you, is for us to start telling everything. No, I'm bad because this and this and this. No, because this and this and this. And we like make people like regret from reading us, and then start like feeling that we are like a broken record, and then start saying, oh my god, change the record. And that is making things worse, because that pain gets like bigger, and that psychological song gets worse. And we need to get to know what is the foundation of the psychological song, and it is the self-consideration. This self-consideration is like these three-headed monsters that can be represented like this. One head is the good guy, the I that feels that he is so good and so kind. And the second head is like the victim guy, who the one that is saying, oh my god, they paid me, they always pay me bad. Or okay, the good one, I was so kind. And the other one is saying inside of us about how other people always pay us bad. And the third head is going to be the hate and the resentment. And you can see, for example, if you have a partner and that person cheat on you, what is going to happen inside of you? You're going to start with that mental chatter, and that mental chatter is going to start to get worse and worse, and you're going to start like feeling that you were so good with that person, and that person paid you so bad. And then comes the hate and the resentment. In that state, you're going to feel that you are never going to fall in love again, and that you are not going to be the good girl anymore, and that if you have any other guy, you're going to cheat on him because all guys are the same, and etc. And all the time you're going to be thinking about that. And if you meet someone, you're going to tell that story over and over again. That is the way all of our psychological songs work. They fire you from work the same. I was so god, that's so good. We are going to put the best things. We were always on time. We did always the best work, whatever. How about they pay you? How they don't how to say, they don't value all of your effort, etc. And now comes the hate and the resentment. I'm never gonna be the good guy. I'm never going to make so much effort for anyone, because that is the self-consideration. That is how it works. And the thing is that sometimes you speak out your psychological songs, but many other times you keep it for yourself. So there are the public singers and the solitary singers. And the public singers are the ones who sing their song to whoever wants to listen to it. To the partner, to the mother, to the friend, to the or they post it in the social media, to seek for someone who understands you, and to seek for someone to consider you, etc. This is the public singers. But there are also solitary singers, and they are the ones who represents like the greatest danger for themselves, since they are actually the ones who have sung their song so much to other people until they begin to be rejected. And there the singer is asked to shut up, to change the record, to talk about something else, and then gets resentful, even worse, and he closed in himself and begins to complain alone, and to sing his song for himself, and to fill himself with hatred, with resentment. But there are also people who are solitary singers because they don't trust on other people, or because they are fear of what others will think, or and they immerse themselves on their pain and resentment, and they destroy themselves internally. And actually, the solitary singers are the ones that end up committing suicide because they were all the time feeding the poisoning themselves with that psychological song, that they end up committing that mistake. They start feeling that, or committing a crime, because sometimes you have resentment against someone and you are all the time there poisoning yourself with that resentment, until at one point those defects are that strong that make you commit that mistake, make a mistake, commit a crime, harm other, or harm yourself, get to suicide. So it is important that we get to understand and eliminate our psychological songs. It doesn't matter if we are public singers or solitary singers. If we get to understand the consequences of this, we are going to be like, we are going to have like the power to start understanding how serious this is. And what are the consequences? Well, the first thing is that our consciousness falls completely asleep. Since if in itself the mental chatter sleep the consciousness, the psychological song, more, because it has like a greater mental and emotional load, and we are constantly involved in that suffering, and we are in those states of hatred and resentments, and there our vibratory levels are all the time like very low, and we are totally far away from love, which is the highest vibration in the universe. And another consequence is that we generate a huge waste of energy, not only mental, but also emotional, for all those feelings of anguish, of grief, of despair, of displeasure, etc. And in that state, all of our internal psychological eyes get, stronger every time, and very perverse defects, such as the killer or the suicidal one, can get to manifest in our mind. And it also causes us to have bad relationships with others, because people end up like first getting tired of listening to our constant song and move away or begin to avoid us. And we become people with that low level of vibration that anyone wants to be around us. And in that state, it's impossible for us to raise our levels of consciousness. It is impossible for us to advance spiritually. And well, we need to start stopping this. And how are we going to do so? Well, we need to get to understand that we need to forgive everyone. That if we want to transform ourselves radically, we need to sacrifice our own sufferings and get to forgive. Because if we keep the hatred inside of us, we are poisoning our soul. And we need to stop that, and we need to start eliminating all that from our interior, and we need to start living in the present moment, where we can experience the peace, the happiness, and the freedom. And how are we going to eliminate our psychological song? Well, we need to know that we all have internally like a little book of accounts in which we keep we keep like recorded all of our sufferings, all of our misfortunes, and we keep there all the people who have paid us badly or who haven't considered us. We all have that accounting book, and we need to start working on that accounting book. And this accounting book is made of these three parts: how good I have been, the bad that I have been paid, and the balance or the revenge. So we are going to start like bringing these psychological songs that we have getting to discover what are the psychological songs that we have, and we are going to try to identify these three aspects. We are going to start asking ourselves, in that situation, that is my psychological song, for example, that I owe someone some money and he didn't pay me back, and I keep that resentment, and I am all the time remembering that that guy did that, or made a business and the other people failed me and left with my money, or my partner cheated on me and I am there with that resentment. Okay, I identified my psychological song. So what is the first thing that I'm going to identify? The good I, the good psychological self, which is a fake feeling. And I'm going to ask myself, I did that without expecting anything in return. So that is important, because that way we are going to discover that everything that we do it with expecting something. We don't give without expecting something in exchange. So we are not like good. We are not loving because we love. We love to be loved back. We give something, so it is given back to us. So that is like the first thing that we need to get to analyze. What defects were behind so much supposed goodness? Okay, I was so good, but actually, what are the defects behind that? Why did I do what I did? Okay, I was a good girl with my partner. Why? Because I didn't want to be alone, because I want everyone to say that I am a good person, because everything there I'm going to discover. So I get to know what were my true hidden interests. So I get like to discern that good guy, you know. And the second aspect that we are going to analyze is that victim self, the one that says that I was paid so bad. And by do so, I need to reflect how many times and to whom have I done what has been done to me. How many times I refused to do a favor because I did a favor to my brother, and when I asked him something, he said no, and I am having that resentment, and I say I'm not doing a favor anymore. But if I get to know that the first head, the good guy, wasn't that good because he was doing a favor, but expecting that because of that, he was going to be held back when he needed. So he was actually like making a business, making himself sure that when he needs something, the other person is going to be for him. So he was not doing that because he was good. So I disarmed that. Now I need to see the victim self. But if I get to analyze how many times have I refused to do a favor, and that way I'm going to see that I have done the same many times. Because, for example, my mother asked me in the morning to do something for her. And I said I couldn't, no, I can't because I have to do this or that. It's a lie. I didn't want to do so. So if I get to analyze this, to find that I am hating in the other person, in myself, to discover that, and then I am going like to destroy this victim I, because I am going to find that what I'm hating in the other person, I already did that, or I already thought about doing that. So if I get to discover that, I'm going to like eliminate this. And well, what is important? To understand the law of mercy. So we forgive others, and so we can be forgiven. Because if we get to understand that we have done that many times before, we need to know that everything that is happening to us now is just karma. If someone owes us, it's because we owe to them. I mean, if someone lied to me, it's because at some point I was a liar, and by karma or because of karma, I have to pay this. If I get to understand this, that as I judge, I will be judged. That what I do is going to be returned to me by karma. Then I am going to forgive people. I'm going to try to pay for my karmas by forgiving others, and that would be like how did I say that? To appeal to the law of mercy. So they have mercy with us as we have mercy with others. Actually, Master Jesus talked about that. Even though you are not Christians, you have probably heard that forgive us our trespasses if we forgive those who trespass against us. And that is that if we get to forgive others, internally, the divine law is going to forgive us our forgive our mistakes. And well, that way, that third aspect of that book of account, which is the hate and the resentment, is going to be broken, because if we learn to forgive, if we get to understand that we have a lot of karmic debts, and that if something is happening to us, is because we owe it, and we start like better, instead of hating others, we start like we forgive, and we start looking for ways to cancel all of our karmic debts. Then we are going to set ourselves free. And what we need to do, we need to eliminate those psychological defects that are the real culprits that we have to experience that situation. Because if someone is cheating on me, it's because I am a cheater. I need to understand that. That if someone is cheating on me, it's because I have cheated on someone before, and in past existences, who knows how many times, and I am paying that karma. So what I need to do, I need to eliminate this cheating defect. I need to eliminate this liar. I need to eliminate this guy that doesn't like to do a favor to anyone. And I need to eliminate the ones that do a favor but expecting to receive that in return. If we get to eliminate all those psychological defects, then our consciousness is going to arise. And with that consciousness, we are going to be able to manifest in life with light. And we are not going to need to be experiencing those situations anymore, because we eliminate the internal culprits. And if we practice the sacrifice for humanity, if you take part of your time to make yourself, to help other people to awaken, to receive this information, then you are receiving Dharma, which is the internal money. And with that Dharma, you are going to be able to pay for your karmas with that love that you are expressing to others. And that way you are going to trespass all those karmic situations that you have to live. And actually, that is the way. If we want to transform ourselves radically, we need to sacrifice our own sufferings. And this has been today's topic. These are the two things, the inner chatter and the psychological song, and how to work on them. I hope that this information is somehow useful for you. And if you have any question, please leave it in the comments, and I will be gladly to solve any questions that you have there in the chat. So thank you very much to all of you, and see you the next time. Ciao, ciao. The next time we are going to talk about the states and events. So that is a very interesting lecture. Don't miss it. Next Friday at the same time. Thank you, and bye-bye.